I am 87 years old. Society calls me a failure, but I am the happiest man in the world. If you search my name on the internet, you will find absolutely nothing. 87 years on this planet and my digital footprint is non-existent. I live in a 74 Airstream trailer, parked behind a roadside diner on the outskirts of Tucson. My total net worth, counting the loose change in the glove compartment of my truck, doesn't even reach 50 bucks. I own no property, I have no 401k, I've never been anyone's boss, neither a director nor a manager of absolutely anything. According to every metric your society uses to measure the value of a human life, I'm a total disaster, an irreparable failure, and at the exact same time, I am without a doubt the happiest man you will ever meet. You look at me and you probably feel pity. You think this poor old man must have made some terrible mistakes to end up like this. I didn't make any mistakes, I chose this deliberately. And today I'm going to tell you a secret that the people who run this world, the people who sign your paychecks and control your schedule, are absolutely terrified you might discover. I'm going to explain to you why being a loser is the only real way to survive this life with your soul intact. Let me take you back to 1959. You probably assume I'm some uneducated guy, someone who never had opportunities. In 1959, I was 20 years old and had just landed a full ride to study law at Harvard University. I was a prodigy, they said, valedictorian of my class. My entire family was proud, the carpenter's son who was going to become a lawyer. My father bought me my first suit. My mother cried tears of joy the day the acceptance letter arrived. The neighbors from the block would come over to congratulate my parents. Finally, someone from our street was going to make it far. On the first day of classes, I walked into that historic building with its high ceilings and hallways that smelled of floor wax and ambition. The walls were lined with portraits of important men dead for decades. Their eyes followed you as you walked. I looked at the other kids. They wore impeccable suits, shiny shoes, perfectly knotted ties. Some carried leather briefcases that probably cost more than my father's monthly salary, but when I looked into their eyes, I saw something that made my blood run cold. They looked like cattle walking into the slaughterhouse. They were terrified of not being the best, terrified of disappointing their parents if they didn't land a spot at a top-tier law firm before turning 30. They were already hyperventilating and the race hadn't even started. I sat down in that wooden chair for exactly 17 minutes. The professor hadn't walked in yet. The kids around me were whispering about which classes were the hardest, who the most demanding professors were, which law firms hired the top graduates. And in those 17 minutes, I understood something fundamental. If I stayed sitting there, I would be handing them a blank check for my entire life. The next 40, 50, 60 years were already written. Studying until 3 in the morning, competing against 200 other students for the top grades, getting unpaid summer internships, working for free hoping they'd hire you, joining a firm, grinding 100-hour weeks to impress the partners, climbing the ladder, buying the house you couldn't afford just to impress people you didn't care about, marrying someone appropriate, having kids who would be raised by other people while you were at the office, dying with money in the bank and regret in your soul. So I stood up. A few kids looked at me weird. I walked toward the exit, my new shoes echoing down the empty hallway. I pushed through those heavy wooden doors, and when I stepped out onto the street, the air tasted different, cleaner. I took off my tie as I walked. I threw it in a trash can on the corner. A man sweeping the sidewalk looked at me and smiled. I think he understood it before I did. I caught a bus heading toward the coast using the money my father had given me for textbooks. I arrived in a small beach town in California 3 hours later. The smell of salt and fish hit me the second I stepped off the bus. I had never seen the ocean up close. My parents didn't speak to me for 12 years. 12 years of absolute silence. They told everyone that I had thrown my life overboard, that I had gone crazy, that drugs had probably melted my brain. They invented stories to explain my disappearance, because the truth was just too incomprehensible for them. Their son had chosen not to be important. But I didn't throw my life away, I saved it. I spent the next 67 years cooking in beachside diners, playing guitar in forgotten town squares, pouring drinks in oceanside dive bars. I worked at a cannery for 2 summers. I painted houses, repaired boats, sold crafts at street markets. I never had a resume, I never had a formal interview. I just showed up places and asked if they needed an extra pair of hands. I earned exactly enough to pay for dinner and a cheap bottle of wine. And every morning, when I opened my eyes, my time belonged to me entirely. I could stay in bed until 10 if I wanted to. I could walk down the beach for hours without feeling like I was wasting something valuable. I could read an entire book in one day if the mood struck me. Let me tell you about my classmate from that first day, a kid named Richard. Richard sat right next to me that morning. We exchanged names. He asked me where I was from. I told him my dad was a carpenter. He told me his dad was a judge. Richard played the game to absolute perfection. I kept track of him from a distance for years, mostly through newspaper clippings I'd stumble upon by chance. He became a corporate lawyer, made millions. Bought a mansion in the suburbs of Boston, a summer house in the Hamptons. He had the flawless wife who appeared in the society pages. He flew first class, dined at the finest restaurants. His kids went to elite private boarding schools. Richard was a winner, by every possible standard. Richard died of a massive, stress-induced heart attack at 54. I read the news in an old paper someone had left behind at the bar where I was working. He dropped dead on the floor of his corner office, surrounded by mahogany furniture and Italian leather. The article mentioned that he had been working on a massive case, that he had been at the office until 11 at night the day before. His perfect wife had already left him, because he worked 80 hours a week. In the piece, she said all the appropriate things about what a dedicated man he had been. His kids didn't even cry at the funeral because they barely knew the man. One of them was studying in London, the other was at a boarding school in Switzerland. He spent 34 years pushing a 2-ton boulder up a mountain just so society would clap for him, and it killed him. They call me a failure, but I am 87 years old, I am breathing, my lungs work, my heart beats. I watch the sunset every single evening without fail, and my heart beats slow and steady. Richard won the game, but what the hell did he actually win? He traded his real life, his breathing, feeling life, for pieces of paper with numbers on them and a name engraved on a brass plaque. He traded quiet mornings for 7 a.m. meetings. He traded real conversations for conference calls. He traded knowing his own kids for quarterly reports. Society sets a monumental trap for you. They convince you that wealth is accumulation. Hoarding more stuff is always better. But things carry weight. Things tie you down. Every possession is an invisible chain. When you buy a massive house, you don't own that house. That house owns you. You have to clean it, or pay someone else to clean it. You have to insure it. You have to fix it when something breaks. You wake up at 3 in the morning sweating because the roof is leaking, or because you heard a strange noise. You have to trap yourself in a job you absolutely hate, just to pay the mortgage on a house you're never actually in, because you're always at work trying to pay for that house. It's sheer, absolute madness. A vicious cycle designed exclusively to keep you running on the hamster wheel. I live in a 26-foot metal tube. If I don't like the view, I hitch the trailer to my truck and drive to Flagstaff or Santa Fe or wherever the hell I feel like going. I don't have to ask anyone for permission. I don't have to coordinate calendars. I don't have to put in a 2-week notice. I just leave. When you have absolutely nothing, you have everything. It's the empty backpack theory. If you're climbing a mountain, who is actually going to enjoy the hike? The guy hauling 100 pounds of gold on his back, sweating and groaning, stopping every 5 minutes because his spine is screaming? Or the guy carrying nothing but a canteen of water, whistling at the birds, feeling the breeze, looking at the wildflowers scattered along the trail? I dropped the gold back in 1959, and I've been floating ever since. And now I look at your generation, and it genuinely breaks my heart. Because you don't just have the pressure of your parents or your neighbors anymore. You carry a machine in your pocket that compares your life to 8 billion other people every single second of the day. You wake up and the first thing you do is stare at that screen. You see people on pristine beaches, at expensive restaurants, in corner offices with killer views, celebrating promotions, buying houses, getting married in magazine cover weddings. And every single image is a reminder that your lives are not enough, that you should be doing more, being more, having more. You've got these influencers, these kids on the internet who never shut up about optimization. They're living the dream, wearing computers on their wrists, counting every single step they take, logging every calorie they eat. They drag themselves out of bed at 4 a.m. to plunge into ice baths because some Silicon Valley billionaire said it was good for productivity. They work out, not because they actually enjoy moving, but because they are optimizing their bodies like they're pieces of machinery. They're trying to build a personal brand, a personal brand. You are a human being, for God's sake, not a box of laundry detergent in a supermarket aisle. You don't need a logo. You don't need a consistent message. You can simply exist. You are punishing yourselves. You're trying to turn your organic, beautiful, messy human life into a perfectly efficient machine. You want to eliminate waste. You want to maximize output. You just want to be better batteries for the system. For what? So you can reach the end of your life and say you never enjoyed a single Tuesday? But hey, your productivity metrics were spectacular. It's a sickness, a collective disease that we have decided to call ambition. You are sprinting on a treadmill, terrified of falling off. And the worst part is, you don't even know where you're running toward. You only know that you have to keep running because everyone else around you is running. Let me tell you what real wealth is. because you won't learn this in any business school. No professor is ever going to tell you this, because their job depends entirely on convincing you of the exact opposite. Wealth is not dreading Monday morning. Wealth is not feeling that crushing weight on your chest on Sunday afternoons. Wealth is waking up at 9 a.m., staring at the ceiling, and realizing that there isn't a single person on this entire planet who can demand you do something you don't want to do. Wealth is the absence of that tight, burning knot in your stomach that follows you through the entire week. Wealth is being able to say no without having to justify yourself. Wealth is time that belongs completely to you. I have no 401k, but I've spent the last 67 years reading books under oak trees. I've read Hemingway sitting on a beach. I've read poetry in empty diners at 6 in the morning. I've had 3-hour conversations with strangers in roadside truck stops at midnight, with truck drivers, with retired teachers, with women fleeing terrible marriages, with young kids who had no idea what to do with their lives. Real conversations, not networking, not trading business cards, just humans, talking to humans. I've watched the rain fall without feeling guilty for not being productive. I've spent entire afternoons just watching the clouds drift by. I have listened to the silence. You think failure is the worst thing that can happen to you. You think if you don't get the promotion, or if you drive a cheap car, you are worthless. Listen to me very carefully. Failure is just the word society uses for the people it cannot control. It is a label they slap on the people who refuse to play the game. When you don't care about status, your boss can't threaten you. They can't dangle the carrot of a better title or a bigger office in front of your face because you don't want any of those things. When you have absolutely nothing to protect, you become bulletproof. They cannot take away what you never wanted in the first place. I am sitting here in a rusted tin can in the middle of nowhere, and I am giving you a gift today. A gift that most people will reject because it's just too terrifying. I am giving you permission to surrender. Surrender to the chase. Step off the treadmill. Drop out of the race. Stop trying to impress people who are just as miserable and terrified as you are. All those people with the massive houses and the expensive cars and the vacations to exotic places, most of them are terrified. Terrified of losing it all. Terrified someone will find out they aren't nearly as important as they pretend to be. If you want to quit that high-paying job that makes your chest ache every Sunday night, quit. If you want to move to a small town and work at a hardware store and paint watercolors on the weekends, do it. If you want to sell everything and buy a van and live by the ocean, do it. They will call you losers. They will whisper about you behind your back. Your parents will be disappointed. Your friends will tell you that you're making a massive mistake. Let them. Let them keep the corner office. Let them keep the high blood pressure. Let them keep the heart attacks at 54. Let them drown in their success. You keep the freedom. Keep the quiet mornings. Keep the time to think. Keep the absolute power to change your mind about your own life without having to dismantle an empire. I'll see you at the bottom, my friends. I promise you the view from down here is spectacular. There is a profound, almost jarring beauty in hearing the story of an 87-year-old man who proudly claims the title of a societal failure while declaring himself the happiest person alive. For generations, we have been fed a singular, unyielding script. Study hard, climb the corporate ladder, accumulate wealth, and buy things you do not need to impress people you do not even like. This story shatters that script entirely by contrasting two starkly different paths. On one hand, we see Richard, who played the game to absolute perfection, accumulating millions and a prestigious reputation, only to collapse from a stress-induced heart attack at 54, completely estranged from his children. On the other hand, we see a man who walked out of Harvard Law School after just 17 minutes, choosing instead a life of simple trades, quiet sunsets, and absolute ownership of his time. The lesson here is not that ambition is inherently evil, but that blind ambition without boundaries is a quiet form of self-destruction. This narrative serves as a powerful mirror, forcing us to look at our own lives and ask an essential question: are we owning our possessions, or are our possessions owning us? Before expanding further, it must be explicitly emphasized that the story created here is purely for educational purposes, designed to spark internal dialogue and help us reevaluate our definition of a meaningful life. A humanistic perspective on freedom. When we look beneath the surface of this old man's radical choice, we find a profound truth about what it means to be truly human. Society has conditioned us to believe that our worth is directly tied to our productivity, our job titles, and the numbers blinking on our bank screens. However, true humanistic value does not lie in how much we can accumulate, but in how deeply we can experience the fleeting gift of existence. I see this narrative not as an endorsement of poverty or a rejection of effort, but as a passionate plea to reclaim ownership of our mental sanity. Every individual deserves the right to step back from the exhausting collective anxiety of modern optimization, and simply breathe without guilt. We have engineered a world where resting feels like a sin, and that is perhaps our greatest cultural tragedy. True wealth is found in the quiet mornings, the unhurried conversations with strangers, and the luxury of choosing where your attention goes. When we constantly compare ourselves to billions of curated lives online, we slowly erode our capacity for genuine contentment. It takes immense courage to let others view you as a failure so that you can protect your own inner peace. Life is a beautiful, messy, organic masterpiece that cannot be perfectly measured by a corporate metric or optimized by a smartwatch. We must remember that we are flesh, blood, and soul, not machines built solely to maximize output for an indifferent economic system. By prioritizing our well-being over social prestige, we offer ourselves and our loved ones a far more authentic version of who we are. Success should be redefined not by what we own, but by how free we are to say no to things that drain our spirit. Ultimately, the perspective shared here reminds us that at the end of our journey, the only applause that matters is the one from our own heart. Let us choose to live consciously, holding our ambitions lightly, while holding our peace and humanity with absolute fierceness. Living a better life today, applying this powerful lesson to our daily lives, does not mean we must all move into an Airstream trailer tomorrow or completely abandon our responsibilities. Instead, it invites us to practice the empty backpack theory right where we are, carrying only what truly serves our happiness. We can start by intentionally detaching our self-worth from external validation and learning to disconnect from the digital noise that constantly whispers that we are not doing enough. We can choose to stop optimizing every single second of our days, allowing ourselves the grace to enjoy a quiet Tuesday afternoon or a genuine conversation without turning it into a networking opportunity. True freedom begins when we realize that failure, in the eyes of a hyper-competitive society, is often just a label used for people who refuse to let anxiety dictate their daily choices. By letting go of the heavy gold of unnecessary expectations, we can finally begin to enjoy the actual hike of life, feeling the breeze and noticing the wildflowers along the way. Disclaimer, disclaimer. The reflections, opinions, and commentary expressed in this text are based on personal interpretation and are intended solely for educational, motivational, and philosophical entertainment purposes. This content does not constitute professional career, financial, psychological, or lifestyle advice. Every individual's circumstances are unique, and listeners should exercise their own judgment and discretion before making major life alterations or financial decisions based on the themes discussed herein.